With surprising strength, he dragged Kofi's body to a corner of the hut and covered it with fresh leaves. Turning to Nnaala, he said, "It is done. Kofi's journey in the spirit world has begun. Now we wait." Nnaala nodded numbly, her eyes fixed on the leaf-covered form of the man she had professed to love. As she left the hut, her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Fear for Kofi's safety warring with her desire for the power the egg could bring her. "What have I done?" she murmured to herself as she stumbled away from the hut. "Kofi, please forgive me. Please come back safely." Meanwhile, in a realm beyond mortal comprehension, Kofi's soul stirred. He opened his eyes to a world unlike anything he had ever seen or imagined. The landscape around him shifted and pulsed with otherworldly energy, colors he had no names for swirling in patterns that defied logic. As he took his first tentative steps in this strange new world, Kofi felt a mix of awe and terror. The old man's warnings echoed in his mind, reminding him of the dangers that lurked in every shadow, behind every illusion. "I can do this," he whispered to himself, clutching the amulet around his neck. "I must do this. For my parents, for myself, for the life I want to reclaim." Kofi clamped his mouth shut, determined to heed the advice that could mean the difference between life and death in this strange place. As he walked, the landscape shifted around him, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. One moment he was traversing what looked like a field of shimmering grass. The next he found himself in a forest of trees with translucent trunks that pulsed with an inner light. Suddenly, amidst the ever-changing scenery, Kofi encountered a sight that made him stop in his tracks. Before him stood a maiden of otherworldly beauty, clothed in a dress the color of freshly spilled blood. Her hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of midnight, and her eyes sparkled with an intelligence that seemed both ancient and playful. "Kofi," she said, her voice like the sweetest music he had ever heard. "I've been waiting for you." Kofi felt his heart race, torn between the instinct to flee and an inexplicable desire to move closer to this enchanting being. Who are you?" he managed to stammer, forgetting for a moment the old man's warning about speaking to the spirits. The maiden's laugh was like silver bells. "A friend, Kofi, someone who understands your quest and wants to help you succeed. Come, follow me. I know where the egg of power is hidden." For a moment, Kofi felt himself swaying towards her, drawn by her beauty and the promise of an easy solution to his quest. But then, like a splash of cold water, he remembered the old man's words. "Trust no one." I can't," Kofi said, taking a step back. "I must find the egg on my own." The maiden's expression darkened for just a moment, a flicker of something sinister crossing her perfect features. "Are you sure, Kofi? The spirit world is vast and dangerous. Without my help, you may wander forever, never finding what you seek." As Kofi hesitated, torn between caution and the temptation of an easy path, another figure emerged from the swirling mists. This new arrival was also female, but where the first maiden was all softness and allure, this one radiated strength and purpose. "Do not listen to her lies, mortal," the newcomer said, her voice ringing with authority. "She is a spirit of death, seeking to lure you to your doom." The first maiden hissed, her beautiful face contorting into a mask of rage. "How dare you interfere? He is mine." Before Kofi's astonished eyes, the two beings lunged at each other, their forms blurring as they engaged in combat beyond human comprehension. The air crackled with energy, and Kofi felt himself being buffeted by waves of power emanating from the battling spirits. As he watched the supernatural conflict unfold, Kofi's mind raced. The old man's warnings echoed in his thoughts. Trust no one. Everything you see is an illusion. With a start, he realized the truth. Both maidens were spirits, neither truly interested in helping him. They were merely different faces of the same deception. Fear gripped Kofi's heart as he understood how close he had come to falling for the spirit world's first trap. Without a backward glance, he turned and ran, his feet carrying him swiftly away from the battling entities. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs trembled, finally coming to a stop at a crossroads unlike any he had ever seen. Two paths stretched out before him, each pulsing with its own unique energy. Above the path to the left, Glowing symbols spelled out death in a script that seemed to writhe and twist. The right-hand path was marked with the word life, in letters that shimmered with a warm, inviting light. Kofi stood at the junction, his mind reeling. Which way, he muttered to himself, acutely aware that choosing the wrong path could mean the end of his quest, and possibly his existence. As he pondered his options, two elderly women materialized. One on each side of the crossroads. They appeared as mirror images of each other, their faces lined with age and wisdom, their eyes holding the depth of centuries. The woman on the right spoke first, her voice warm and maternal. "Come, Kofi. Follow the road of life, for you shall not die. This path leads to salvation and the fulfillment of your quest." Before Kofi could respond, the woman on the left interjected, her tone sharp and commanding. "No, Kofi, do not be fooled. The path of death is the true way. Only by embracing death can you hope to find the egg of power." Kofi's head swam with confusion. Both women seemed sincere, yet he knew that in this world of illusions, appearances meant nothing. "I don't want to die," he whispered, fear clutching at his heart. Then, in a moment of clarity, Kofi remembered the amulet hanging around his neck. The old man had said it would offer some protection and guidance. With trembling hands, he grasped the ancient talisman, closing his eyes and focusing his thoughts on it. To his amazement, he felt a gentle warmth emanating from the amulet. When he opened his eyes, he saw a faint glow coming from the left-hand path, the one marked Death. Taking a deep breath, Kofi made his decision. "I choose the path of death," he announced, his voice stronger than he felt. The woman on the left smiled, a look of approval crossing her weathered features. "A wise choice, young one. Remember, in the spirit world, things are seldom what they seem." With that, both women vanished, leaving Kofi alone at the crossroads. Steeling himself, he set foot on the left-hand path, the one he hoped would lead him closer to his goal. As he traveled deeper into the spirit realm, the landscape became even stranger. Spirits of all shapes and sizes drifted past him, some barely acknowledging his presence, others regarding him with open curiosity or hostility. Kofi kept his gaze straight ahead, remembering the old man's warning not to engage with any of the beings he encountered. Despite his determination to remain focused, Kofi couldn't help but marvel at the sights around him. Floating islands drifted by overhead, their undersides teeming with otherworldly life. Rivers of light flowed through the air, carrying what looked like memories and dreams in their currents. In the distance, he could see massive structures that defied the laws of physics, twisting and reforming in ways that made his head hurt to contemplate. As he walked, a nagging question kept repeating in Kofi's mind. Where exactly is the egg of power? He had been wandering for what felt like hours, or was it days? Time seemed to have little meaning in this place, and he felt no closer to his goal than when he started. Lost in his thoughts, Kofi almost didn't notice when a gentle hand tapped him on the shoulder. He spun around, startled, to find himself face to face with yet another maiden. This one was different from the others he had encountered. There was a softness to her features, a kindness in her eyes that seemed genuine. "Kofi," she said, her voice like a cool breeze on a hot day. "I know what you seek. The egg of power, I have it here." She held out her hands, and floating just above her palms was an egg unlike anything Kofi had ever seen. It pulsed with an inner light, its surface shimmering with all the colors of the rainbow and more besides. Kofi's heart leapt in his chest. Could it be? Had he finally found what he was looking for? Without thinking, he reached out to take the egg, his fingers trembling with anticipation. The moment his skin made contact with the egg's surface, the world around him dissolved. Kofi felt a sickening lurch in his stomach as reality seemed to twist and warp. When everything settled, he found himself in a small dark cave with no visible exit. "No!" Kofi cried out, realizing too late that he had fallen for another of the spirit world's deceptions. "I am so foolish. How could I forget the old man's warning so easily?" As if in response to his outburst, a booming laugh echoed through the cave. The maiden's voice, now twisted and cruel, filled the air around him. "Foolish mortal," she cackled, "did you really think it would be so easy? Don't worry, I can't kill you. You're already dead, after all. But if you remain in this place for more than a day, you'll become a permanent resident of the spirit world. No more chances to return to your precious mortal life." With that final taunt, her presence vanished, leaving Kofi alone in the oppressive darkness of the cave. Panic welled up inside him as the reality of his situation sank in. He had been so close, or at least he thought he had been, to achieving his goal. Now, trapped in this featureless cave, he felt farther from the egg of power than ever. "What have I done?" Kofi moaned, sinking to his knees. "I've failed everyone, my parents, Nnaala, myself. I'll never reclaim my manhood now." As despair threatened to overwhelm him, Kofi's hand brushed against the amulet still hanging around his neck. A small spark of hope ignited in his chest. The amulet had guided him before. Perhaps it could help him again. Grasping the ancient talisman tightly, Kofi closed his eyes and focused all his thoughts on it. "Please," he whispered, "show me the way out. Help me continue my quest." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Kofi became aware of a faint warmth emanating from the amulet. Opening his eyes, he saw that it was glowing softly, the light pulsing in a steady rhythm. Following his instincts, Kofi stood and held the amulet out in front of him. As he moved it around, he noticed that the glow intensified when he pointed it in a particular direction. Heart pounding with renewed hope, he began to examine the cave walls more closely. There, almost invisible in the dim light, Kofi spotted a series of symbols etched into the rock. They matched the markings on his amulet perfectly. Placing his hand on the symbols, Kofi felt a surge of energy course through him. With a grinding of stone on stone, a section of the wall slid away, revealing a passage beyond. Without hesitation, Kofi stepped through, leaving the trap behind him. As he emerged on the other side, Kofi found himself once again in the ever-changing landscape of the spirit world. But now, armed with the lessons learned from his close calls, he felt more prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. "I won't be fooled again," Kofi vowed to himself. "I'll find the true egg of power, no matter what it takes." With renewed determination, Kofi set off once more, the amulet glowing softly against his chest, guiding him deeper into the mysteries of the spirit realm. The path ahead was still fraught with danger, but Kofi now understood that every challenge, every deception was bringing him one step closer to his ultimate goal. The sun had risen and set twice since Kofi embarked on his perilous journey to the spirit world. In the village, an atmosphere of tense anticipation hung in the air, particularly in the humble compound of Kofi's family. His mother, Adwoa, found herself unable to find peace, her mind constantly filled with worry for her brave son. As the second night fell, Adwoa tossed and turned on her sleeping mat, unable to close her eyes for more than a few moments. The silence of the night was broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant cry of a nocturnal animal. Each sound made her start, wondering if it might somehow be a sign of Kofi's return. "Oh, ancestors," she whispered into the darkness, her voice trembling with emotion, "watch over my son. Guide him through the dangers of the spirit world and bring him safely back to us." As the first light of dawn began to creep across the sky, Adwoa rose, her body weary from lack of sleep, but her mind alert with worry. She moved through her morning chores mechanically, her thoughts never straying far from Kofi. Later that morning, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Adwoa made her way to the old man's hut on the outskirts of the village. The wise elder sat outside, his wizened face turned towards the rising sun as if seeking answers in its warming rays. "Wise one," Adwoa called out as she approached, her voice tinged with desperation, "please, have you any news of my son? Is Kofi safe?" The old man turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of compassion and something else, a knowledge that seemed to stretch beyond the boundaries of their world. "Ah, Adwoa," he said softly, "your son's journey is not yet complete. The spirit world moves in ways we cannot fully comprehend." Adwoa's heart sank at his words. "But surely you must know something," she pleaded. "Is he in danger? Will he return to us?" The old man sighed, his gnarled hands grasping his walking stick. "I cannot see clearly all that transpires in the realm of spirits," he admitted, "but know this, Kofi has but 3 days remaining to complete his quest and return to our world. Should he fail to do so, The old man's voice trailed off, leaving the ominous implication hanging in the air. Adwoa felt her knees weaken and she sank to the ground beside the old man. 3 days, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Only 3 days to return, or he will be lost to us forever. The old man nodded solemnly. The spirit world is not meant for mortal souls to linger in for long. If Kofi cannot retrieve the egg of power and find his way back within this time, I fear he may become trapped there for eternity. Tears welled up in Adwoa's eyes, spilling down her cheeks. "Oh, wise one, what have we done? How could we have let him undertake such a dangerous quest?" The old man placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Your son is brave, Adwoa. He chose this path knowing the risks. We must have faith in his strength and his determination." Adwoa wiped her tears with the back of her hand, trying to draw strength from the old man's words. "You are right," she said, her voice steadying. "Kofi has always been strong. He will find a way. He must." As she rose to leave, the old man called out to her, "Adwoa, remember, the power of a mother's love can transcend even the boundaries between worlds. Your prayers, your hopes, Kofi can feel them, even in the spirit realm. Do not lose heart." Nodding gratefully, Adwoa made her way back to the village, her steps heavy but her resolve strengthened. As she walked, she whispered a prayer to the ancestors, asking them to watch over her son and guide him safely home. Meanwhile, in the otherworldly realm of spirits, Kofi pressed on with his quest. The landscape around him was unlike anything he had ever seen, shifting, ethereal, defying the laws of nature as he knew them. Colors swirled in impossible patterns, and the very ground beneath his feet seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. As he journeyed deeper into this strange realm, Kofi encountered various spirits and obstacles. Some tried to deceive him, taking on familiar forms to lure him off his path. Others challenged him directly, testing his courage and resolve. Through it all, Kofi held fast to his purpose, driven by the thought of his village, his family, and the shame he sought to overcome. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of wandering, Kofi arrived at a massive cave entrance. The air around it crackled with power, and he could feel the weight of ancient magic pressing down upon him. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The cave's interior was illuminated by an eerie, pulsating light that seemed to emanate from the very walls. As Kofi ventured deeper, he saw it. The egg of power rested atop an intricately carved stone pedestal, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly light. Kofi's heart raced as he gazed upon it, knowing that his ultimate goal was finally within reach. But between him and the object of his quest stood two formidable guardians, ancient spirits whose very presence made the air crackle with energy. Kofi took a deep breath, steadying himself as he faced the spirits. Their eyes blazed with an inner fire, and their forms seemed to shift and shimmer like heat mirages. He could feel the weight of centuries in their gaze, the accumulated power of eons spent guarding this precious artifact. The female spirit spoke first, her voice reverberating through the cavern like rolling thunder. "Mortal, you trespass where no living being should dare to venture. Turn back now, and we shall spare your life. Persist, and you will face consequences beyond your comprehension." Her male counterpart added, his voice a low, menacing growl. "Countless have tried to claim the egg of power. All have failed. What makes you think you are different, boy?" Kofi felt fear coursing through his veins, but he stood his ground. The wise man's words echoed in his mind. Becoming courageous cannot take away fear, but be willing to face it. Drawing strength from this memory, Kofi squared his shoulders and addressed the spirits. "I am Kofi of the village beyond the misty mountains," he declared, his voice steadier than he felt. "I have journeyed through the spirit realm, faced countless trials, and stand before you now, not out of greed or ambition, but out of necessity. I seek the egg of power to right a wrong and reclaim what was taken from me." The spirits exchanged a glance, a flicker of surprise passing between them. The male spirit spoke again, "Your words are bold, mortal, but words alone will not sway us from our sacred duty. We have guarded this egg for millennia, and we will continue to do so for millennia more." Kofi's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I understand your duty, noble spirits, but I cannot, will not turn back now. I have come too far, sacrificed too much. I would rather perish here, fighting for what I believe in, than return home in shame and defeat." The female spirit's eyes narrowed. "You speak of shame and defeat, yet you know nothing of true loss. We have watched empires rise and fall, seen the birth and death of countless stars. Your mortal concerns are but a fleeting breath in the grand tapestry of existence." "Perhaps," Kofi conceded, "but to me they are everything. My village, my family, my very identity, all hang in the balance. I do not wish to fight you, but I will if I must." The spirit's anger was palpable, the air around them shimmering with barely contained power. They had not encountered such determination in a mortal for ages, and it both impressed and infuriated them. Without warning, both guardians unleashed a barrage of spiritual energy at Kofi. The force of their attack sent him flying backward, his body slamming against the cavern wall with bone-jarring force. Gasping for breath, Kofi struggled to his feet, his entire body aching from the impact. "Is that all you've got?" he taunted, though his voice was strained with pain. "I've faced worse in my village's annual wrestling matches." The male spirit's eyes flashed dangerously. "You dare mock us, insect? We shall show you the true meaning of power." The battle raged on, with Kofi dodging and weaving as best he could, occasionally landing a punch or kick that seemed to do little more than annoy the spirits. For every blow he managed to land, he received 10 in return, each more devastating than the last. As Kofi found himself once again thrown to the ground, his body battered and his spirit wavering, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered of defeat. But then, as if in response to his despair, he felt a warmth against his chest, the amulet given to him by his mother. With trembling hands, Kofi grasped the amulet, focusing all his remaining energy into it. "Ancestors, guide me," he murmured. "Lend me your strength in this moment of need." Suddenly, the amulet began to glow, pulsing with a brilliant light that filled the entire cavern. The spirits recoiled, shielding their eyes from the unexpected radiance. "What trickery is this?" the female spirit hissed, her voice laced with pain and confusion. Seizing the moment, Kofi yanked the amulet from his neck and thrust it towards the spirits. The light intensified, becoming almost unbearable even to Kofi's mortal eyes. The guardians howled in agony, their forms seeming to waver and distort in the amulet's glow. "Impossible!" the male spirit roared. "No mortal artifact should hold such power." Kofi advanced on the spirits, the amulet held before him like a shield. With each step he took, the guardians retreated, their once mighty forms now diminished and weak. "I don't want to destroy you," Kofi said, his voice firm despite his exhaustion, "but I will do what I must to claim the egg of power. Stand aside and let this end peacefully." The spirits exchanged a look of defeat and grudging respect. The female spirit spoke, her voice now a mere whisper of its former thunderous power. "In all our long years of guardianship, we have never encountered a mortal like you, Kofi of the Misty Mountains. Your courage, your determination, and the power you wield, perhaps you are indeed worthy of the egg." Her companion nodded in agreement. "We concede this battle, mortal. The egg of power is yours, but heed our warning, its power is beyond imagination. Use it wisely, for it has the potential to bring great good or terrible destruction." With those words, the spirits faded away, their forms dissolving into motes of light that scattered throughout the cavern. Kofi stood in stunned silence for a moment, scarcely able to believe that he had emerged victorious. As the realization of his triumph washed over him, Kofi felt a mixture of elation and humility. He had faced his greatest fear, stood against beings of immense power, and emerged victorious. Yet he knew that this victory had come not just through his own strength, but through the wisdom of the old man, the power of the amulet, and perhaps even the blessing of his ancestors. With reverent steps, Kofi approached the carved stone pedestal where the egg of power rested. Its surface seemed to ripple with colors he had no names for, and he could feel the raw energy emanating from it. As he reached out to grasp it, Kofi whispered a prayer of thanks to all those who had helped him on his journey. The moment his fingers touched the egg, a surge of power coursed through him, filling him with an indescribable sensation of strength and possibility. Kofi knew in that instant that his life would never be the same. As he cradled the egg of power in his hands, Kofi allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The battle had been won, but he knew that his journey was far from over. With the egg in his possession, he now faced the challenge of using its power responsibly and finding his way back to his own world. "I did it," Kofi murmured to himself, a mix of disbelief and pride in his voice. "I actually did it. Mother, father, I'm coming home, and I'm bringing the means to set everything right." With a deep breath, Kofi turned away from the now empty pedestal and began making his way out of the cavern. The egg of power pulsed warmly in his grasp, a constant reminder of the incredible adventure he had just experienced and the new responsibilities he now carried. As he emerged from the cave into the ever-shifting landscape of the spirit world, Kofi felt a new sense of purpose and confidence. He had faced his greatest challenge and emerged victorious. Whatever trials lay ahead on his journey home, he knew he was now ready to face them. "Onward," Kofi said to himself, his voice filled with determination. "It's time to fulfill my destiny and make things right." With that, he set off into the swirling mists of the spirit realm, the egg of power safely in his possession and his heart full of hope for the future. As Kofi clutched the egg of power, he could sense the growing unrest in the spirit world. The air crackled with energy, and distant cries of other spirits echoed through the ethereal landscape. They were coming for the egg, drawn by its immense power and the disturbance caused by its removal. But Kofi felt no fear. He had faced the Guardians and emerged victorious. With the egg in his possession, he felt invincible. Closing his eyes, he focused his thoughts on the old man's hut, back in the human world. In an instant, the spirit realm dissolved around him, replaced by the familiar surroundings of the wise man's dwelling. Kofi found himself lying flat on his back. The cool earth beneath him, a stark contrast to the otherworldly terrain he had just left. The egg of power pulsed warmly in his hands, a tangible reminder of his incredible journey. The old man's weathered face appeared above him, a mixture of relief and pride etched in his features. "Finally, you've returned," the wise man declared, his voice filled with warmth. "You've done it, my boy. You've actually done it." Kofi sat up slowly, his body aching from the battle, but his heart soaring with joy. "I can hardly believe it myself," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I faced challenges I never thought possible, but here I am, with the egg of power in my hands." The old man nodded sagely. "You've proven yourself worthy, Kofi. Not many could have accomplished what you have." As Kofi got to his feet, a wave of excitement washed over him. At last, he thought, his heart racing, "I'm going to get back everything I lost. I'll be the man I was before, whole and respected once again." Just as Kofi was about to speak again, a commotion outside caught their attention. Nnaala, the maiden Kofi had fallen for during his preparations for the spirit world journey, burst into the hut, her eyes wide with excitement. "Kofi," she exclaimed, breathless from running, "you're back. I knew you could do it." Kofi's brow furrowed in confusion. "Nnaala, how did you know I had returned? I've only just arrived." Nnaala's smile faltered for a moment before she quickly recovered. "Oh, Kofi," she said, her voice sweet as honey, "I've been checking the old man's hut every day since you left. I've been so worried about you, praying to the ancestors for your safe return." The old man's eyes narrowed slightly at Nnaala's words, but Kofi, still elated from his success, didn't notice. Nnaala's gaze fell to Kofi's hands, where the egg of power rested. Her eyes widened, a glimmer of something unreadable passing through them. Is that the egg?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. Kofi, proud of his achievement and eager to impress Nnaala, held out the egg for her to see. "Yes, this is it," he said, beaming. "The egg of power, just as the legends described it." Before anyone could react, Kofi, in a moment of misplaced trust and foolishness, placed the egg in Nnaala's outstretched hands. "Here, you can see it for yourself," he said, still smiling. The old man's cry of warning came too late. "No, Kofi, don't give her the egg." But it was already done. The moment the egg touched Nnaala's palms, her demeanor changed entirely. A triumphant smile spread across her face as she clutched the egg tightly. "Egg of power," she commanded, her voice ringing with authority, "take me far from here." In a blinding flash of light, Nnaala vanished, taking the egg of power with her. Kofi stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. "No," he whispered, his voice rising in panic. "No, no, no, she tricked me. Nnaala, how could you?" The old man's laughter, tinged with bitterness, filled the hut. "Oh, you foolish boy," he said, shaking his head. "I knew that maiden was trouble from the moment you brought her here. She never loved you, Kofi. She was after the egg all along." Kofi turned to the old man, his eyes wide with disbelief and hurt. "But Bub! But why? How could you know?" The wise man sighed heavily. "I've lived long enough to recognize deceit when I see it. I sensed her true intentions from the beginning, but I hoped you would see through her facade on your own." Kofi's shoulders slumped as the full weight of his mistake crashed down upon him. "I've been such a fool," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I went through so much in the spirit world, faced so many dangers, only to lose the egg in a moment of stupidity." "Indeed," the old man replied, his tone softening slightly. "You placed your trust in the wrong person, Kofi. It's a harsh lesson, but one you needed to learn." Kofi's mind raced, trying to make sense of what had happened. But what could Nnaala want with the egg? "Wise one, I need that egg to regain my manhood. Without it, all my efforts have been for nothing." The old man stroked his beard thoughtfully. "The egg of power is an artifact of immense ability, Kofi. It can do almost anything, at any time. As for Nnaala's plans, I cannot say. But know this, she is not from our village. Her motives are her own, and likely not for the benefit of anyone but herself." Kofi's eyes widened in shock. "She's not from our village, but I thought—" He trailed off, realizing how little he truly knew about Nnaala. "How could I have been so blind?" he muttered. "Love, or what we believe to be love, can cloud our judgment," the old man said gently. "But now is not the time for self-pity, Kofi. You must act quickly if you hope to recover the egg." Kofi straightened up, a new determination settling over him. "You're right," he said, his voice growing stronger. "I can't give up now, not after everything I've been through. But how can I find her? Where do I even begin to look?" The old man shook his head. "I'm afraid I can't help you there, my boy. Nnaala's origins are as much a mystery to me as they are to you. You'll have to rely on your own wits and determination to track her down." Kofi nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Then that's what I'll do," he declared. "I'll search every village, every forest, every mountain if I have to. I'll find Nnaala, recover the egg of power, and finally set things right." The wise man placed a gnarled hand on Kofi's shoulder. "It won't be easy," he warned. "The egg's power is vast, and in the wrong hands, it could cause great harm. Be cautious, Kofi, and remember the lessons you've learned both in the spirit world and here." Kofi squared his shoulders, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "I understand," he said solemnly. "I won't fail again. I'll bring back the egg, no matter what it takes." As Kofi prepared to set out on this new quest, he couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions: anger at Nnaala's betrayal, disappointment in himself for falling for her deception, and a burning determination to right his wrongs. The journey ahead would be challenging, but Kofi was ready to face whatever obstacles lay in his path. The egg of power and his future depended on it. Kofi trudged away from the old man's hut, his shoulders slumped and his heart heavy. This was the second major mistake he had made, and the weight of his regret threatened to crush him. "How could I have been so foolish?" he muttered to himself, shaking his head in disbelief. As he approached his family's compound, Kofi's stomach churned with anxiety. How could he face his parents after failing so spectacularly? His feet felt like lead as he crossed the threshold. The moment his mother saw him, she rushed forward, enveloping him in a warm embrace. "My son, you've returned," she exclaimed, her voice thick with relief. But as she pulled back, she noticed the sorrow etched on Kofi's face. Her joy quickly turned to concern. "Kofi, what's wrong? Why do you look so troubled? You should be celebrating your successful journey to the spirit world." Kofi's father approached, his brow furrowed. "Son, what happened? Did you not find the egg?" Kofi's whole body trembled as he struggled to find the words. "Father, mother," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I found the egg. I brought it back from the spirit world, but—" He paused, swallowing hard. "But what?" his father pressed, impatience creeping into his tone. "I lost it again," Kofi blurted out, the words tumbling from his lips in a rush. "There was this maiden, Nnaala. I thought she cared for me, but she tricked me. I foolishly handed her the egg, and she vanished with it." His father's face darkened with anger. "You did what?" he roared. "After everything you went through, you just gave the egg away? To a woman you barely know? Have you learned nothing, Kofi?" Kofi flinched at his father's harsh words, knowing he deserved every bit of the anger directed at him. His mother's voice was softer, but no less disappointed. "Oh, Kofi, how could you be so careless? This maiden, she's not even from our village. How do you expect to find her now?" I don't know," Kofi admitted, his voice cracking. "I've failed you both, again." His father paced the room, his frustration palpable. "Do you realize what this means, Kofi? The villagers will continue to mock you. All your efforts, all our hopes, gone in an instant because of your foolishness." Kofi stood there, absorbing his parents' words, each one striking him like a physical blow. He had lost everything. His manhood, his respect, Oluchi, his first love, and now the egg he had risked everything to obtain. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though he knew the words were woefully inadequate. "I will find a way to make this right. I promise." His mother sighed heavily. "Oh, my son. Your heart has always been too trusting. But now you must be stronger, smarter. The road ahead will not be easy." Kofi nodded, a tiny spark of determination flickering to life within him. "I know, Mother. I will not rest until I've recovered the egg and restored our family's honor." His father's anger seemed to deflate slightly. "See that you do, Kofi, for all our sakes." As Kofi retreated to his room, the enormity of his task loomed before him. But despite the overwhelming odds, he knew he had no choice but to try. His journey, it seemed, was far from over. 7 days had passed since Nnaala's disappearance with the Egg of Power. For Kofi, each day had been an eternity of regret, self-recrimination, and desperate planning. He had searched tirelessly, following every lead, no matter how slim, but to no avail. Now, on this 7th day, Kofi sat in his hut, his eyes fixed on the ground, lost in thought. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke through his reverie. "Kofi?" He looked up, disbelief etched on his face. There, standing in the doorway, was Nnaala, the Egg of Power cradled in her hands. "Nnaala," Kofi whispered, rising to his feet. "Is it really you?" She approached him, her eyes brimming with tears. "Kofi, I've returned the egg. I'm so sorry I took it away. I was wrong to take what I never suffered for. Now I see that its powers were not meant for me to use." Kofi stood frozen, a whirlwind of emotions coursing through him, relief, anger, confusion, and a glimmer of hope. He reached out tentatively, his hands shaking as he accepted the egg from Nnaala. "Why?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Why did you take it? I trusted you, Nnaala. I thought—" Nnaala hung her head in shame. "I'm sorry, Kofi. Truly I am. I never intended to steal it. But my father, he forced me. He told me about the egg's powers, how it could solve the problems plaguing our village. I was weak and I gave in to his demands. Please, can you ever forgive me?" Kofi's brow furrowed as he processed her words. "Your village, what problems?" Nnaala sighed heavily. "Our crops have been failing for years. Disease has been spreading among our people. My father thought the egg could save us all, but Kofi, it only made things worse, the egg's power. It's not meant for just anyone to use. It brought more calamity than help." Kofi looked down at the egg in his hands, feeling its familiar warmth. "So you brought it back because it didn't work for you?" "No," Nnaala said firmly. "I brought it back because it was the right thing to do. Because I realized the terrible mistake I'd made in betraying your trust. The egg belongs to you, Kofi. You're the one who faced the challenges of the spirit world. You're the one who truly needs its power." Kofi stood silent for a long moment, conflicting emotions warring within him. Finally he spoke, his voice soft but resolute. "Nnaala, what you did, it hurt me deeply. But I understand why you did it. I forgive you." Nnaala's eyes widened in surprise. "You do?" Kofi nodded. "Yes, but now we must act quickly. Come with me to the old man's hut. It's time to set things right." Together they made their way to the wise man's dwelling. The old man's eyebrows shot up in surprise as he saw them enter, the egg safely in Kofi's possession. "Well, well," the old man said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "It seems the prodigal egg has returned, and you, young lady, have some explaining to do." Nnaala bowed her head respectfully. "Wise one, I have no excuses for my actions. I can only ask for forgiveness and hope to make amends." The old man studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Redemption is always possible for those who truly seek it. Now, Kofi, are you ready to claim your destiny?" Kofi stepped forward, presenting the egg to the old man. "Yes, wise one, I'm ready." The old man took the egg, raised it above his head, and began to chant in a language Kofi didn't understand. The air in the hut seemed to thicken, charged with an otherworldly energy. After a few moments, the old man handed the egg back to Kofi. "Speak to it," the wise man instructed. "Tell it your deepest desire and the reason behind it. But choose your words carefully, for the egg's power is great, but not without limits." Kofi took a deep breath, cradling the egg in his hands. He closed his eyes, focusing all his thoughts on his wish. "Egg of power," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "I made a grave mistake in the past. I touched an ancient statue that I should never have approached. It placed a curse on me, taking away my manhood. I ask you now, please forgive my foolishness and grant me the return of what I've lost." As Kofi's words faded, a heavy silence fell over the hut. Seconds ticked by, feeling like hours. Kofi's heart raced, doubt creeping into his mind. "Why isn't anything happening?" he wondered aloud. "Did I say something wrong? Is this even the right egg?" The old man held up a hand for silence. "Patience, Kofi. The egg's power works in mysterious ways. Do not question it. Simply wait and have faith." Just as Kofi was about to speak again, a strange light began to emanate from the egg. It grew brighter and brighter until Kofi had to squint against its intensity. Suddenly, he felt a surge of energy course through his body, a warmth that spread from his core to the tips of his fingers and toes. As quickly as it had appeared, the light faded. Kofi stood still for a moment, hardly daring to breathe. Then slowly he looked down at himself. It worked," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "I can feel it. I'm whole again." Nnaala clapped her hands in delight, while the old man nodded approvingly. "You've done well, Kofi," the wise man said. "You've faced great challenges and overcome them. The egg recognized your worthiness and granted your wish." Kofi's face broke into a wide grin, joy radiating from every pore. He turned to Nnaala, who was smiling back at him, tears of happiness in her eyes. "Kofi," the old man said, his tone suddenly serious, "your journey has brought you more than just the return of your manhood. While you were in the spirit world, our village suffered a great loss. The king, he has passed on." Kofi's celebration came to an abrupt halt. "The king? Dead? But how?" The old man sighed heavily. "Age finally caught up with him, my boy. That, and the sorrow of never having a son to carry on his legacy. He died just days after you left for the spirit world." Kofi felt a pang of sadness. The king had been a good and just ruler, respected by all. "May he rest in peace," Kofi murmured. "But what happens now? Who will lead our people?" The old man's eyes twinkled mysteriously. "That, my boy, is a question that may have a surprising answer. But for now, rejoice in your victory. You've overcome great odds and proven yourself in ways few could imagine. The future, I suspect, holds great things for you, Kofi." As Kofi left the hut with Nnaala, his heart was full. He had regained what he had lost, found forgiveness, and stood on the threshold of a new chapter in his life. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he was ready to face them, stronger and wiser than ever before. Kofi's heart raced with excitement as he rushed home, his body tingling with newfound energy. He felt whole again, his manhood restored after the harrowing journey to the spirit world. The village paths seemed brighter, the air fresher, as if the world itself was celebrating his triumph. "Mama, Papa!" Kofi shouted, his voice carrying across the village. "I'm home, I'm whole again." As he approached his family's compound, Kofi saw his mother emerge from their hut, her eyes wide with hope and disbelief. "Kofi, my son, is it true?" she called out, her voice trembling. "Yes, Mama," Kofi replied, grinning from ear to ear. "I did it. I'm a full man again." His mother rushed to him, wrapping him in a tight embrace. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she held her son close. "Oh, my brave boy," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I never lost faith in you." Kofi's father appeared in the doorway, his usually stern face softening at the sight of his son's jubilant return. "Father," Kofi said, meeting his eyes, "I've done it. I've restored our family's honor." His father stepped forward, placing a hand on Kofi's shoulder. "Truly, you are as brave as you claimed," he said, his voice gruff with pride. I am sorry for doubting you, my son." Kofi nodded, accepting his father's apology. "Thank you, Father. Your words mean more to me than you know." As the family celebrated inside their hut, neighbors began to gather outside, drawn by the commotion. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd. "Is it true?" one woman asked. "Has Kofi really regained his manhood?" "I heard he went to the spirit world," another villager exclaimed. "Can you imagine the courage that must have taken?" An elderly man shook his head in amazement. "We were wrong to mock him. The boy has proven himself a true warrior." The morning sun cast a warm glow over the village as Kofi sat with his parents in their compound. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers and the distant sounds of villagers going about their daily routines. Kofi's heart was light, his face beaming with joy as he recounted his incredible journey to the spirit world. "My son," his mother said, her eyes shining with pride, "you have brought great honor to our family. Your bravery knows no bounds." Kofi's father nodded in agreement. "Indeed, you have proven yourself a true warrior, Kofi. I couldn't be more proud." As they continued their joyful conversation, a sudden commotion caught their attention. The sound of many footsteps and excited voices grew louder, drawing nearer to their compound. Kofi and his parents exchanged puzzled glances before rising to their feet. What could this be? Kofi's father wondered aloud, his brow furrowed with concern. As they stepped outside, they were met with an astonishing sight. It seemed as if the entire village had gathered at their doorstep. Men, women, children, and elders alike stood before them, their faces a mixture of excitement and reverence. Kofi, taken aback by the unexpected crowd, stepped forward. His voice tinged with confusion, he asked, "Please, what brings you all to our compound? Have I done something wrong?" From the crowd, an elderly man with a lined face and wise eyes emerged. He leaned heavily on his walking stick as he approached Kofi. The old man's voice was filled with remorse as he spoke. "Kofi, my boy," he began, "first, we must apologize. The way we treated you during your troubles was shameful. We laughed and mocked when we should have offered support. For this, we are truly sorry." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Kofi, touched by the sincerity in the old man's voice, nodded in acceptance. The elder continued, his voice growing stronger, "But that is not the only reason we are here. Kofi, your journey to the spirit world, your bravery in the face of unimaginable challenges, has proven to us all that you possess the qualities of a true leader." Kofi's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean?" he asked, his heart beginning to race. The old man smiled. "The village elders have met, and we have reached a decision. With the passing of our beloved king, we find ourselves in need of a new leader. Someone brave, someone who has faced adversity and emerged stronger. Someone like you, Kofi." A hush fell over the crowd as the elder's words hung in the air. Kofi felt as if the world had suddenly stopped spinning. "Me?" he whispered, scarcely believing his ears. "Yes, Kofi," the elder confirmed. "We have come to ask if you will accept the honor of becoming our new king. In 3 days' time, we wish to crown you as the ruler of our village." Kofi stood in stunned silence, his mind reeling from the unexpected turn of events. His parents, equally shocked, looked at their son with a mixture of pride and awe. Finally, Kofi found his voice. I am deeply honored," he said, his words filled with emotion. "If the village truly believes I am worthy, then I accept this great responsibility. I promise to lead our people with courage, wisdom, and compassion." A cheer erupted from the crowd, their jubilant voices filling the air. Kofi's parents embraced him, tears of joy streaming down their faces. The news of Kofi's upcoming coronation spread through the village like a wildfire. People gathered in small groups, talking excitedly about the young man who had braved the spirit world and returned a hero. "Did you hear?" one woman whispered to her neighbor. "Kofi is to be our new king." "Incredible," her friend replied. "Who would have thought the boy we once mocked would become our leader?" The news eventually reached Oluchi, the maiden who had rejected Kofi when he lost his manhood. Her eyes widened in shock as she heard the villagers chatter. "Kofi, the new king," she muttered to herself. "Oh, what a fool I've been." Oluchi's mind raced with thoughts of power and status. She imagined herself as the queen, admired and respected by all. With determination in her eyes, she set off to find Kofi. She found him near the village square, talking with some elders. Oluchi waited impatiently until Kofi was alone, then approached him with a sweet smile. "Kofi," she called out, her voice as smooth as honey. "May I speak with you?" Kofi turned, surprise flickering across his face. "Oluchi, what brings you here?" Oluchi batted her eyelashes, trying to look as appealing as possible. "Oh, Kofi," she began, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "I've been so foolish. I never should have rejected you. Please, can you find it in your heart to forgive me and take me back?" Kofi's expression hardened as he listened to Oluchi's plea. He remembered the pain of her rejection, how she had turned her back on him in his darkest hour. Now, with the promise of power, she wanted him again. "Oluchi," Kofi said, his voice firm but not unkind, "you once rejected me when I needed support the most. Today I must reject you in turn." Oluchi's smile faltered. "But Kofi, we were so good together. Don't you remember?" Kofi shook his head. "I remember, Oluchi, but I also remember how quickly you turned away when things got difficult. I've changed, and my heart now belongs to another." "Another?" Oluchi gasped, her facade cracking. "Who?" "Her name is Nnaala," Kofi replied, a soft smile touching his lips. "She saw my worth even when I had nothing to offer but myself." Oluchi's face twisted with anger. "Nnaala, but I heard she stole from you. How can you trust her?" Kofi's eyes flashed. "She made a mistake, yes. But she owned up to it and made things right. That takes courage, Oluchi. Something you couldn't show when I needed it most." "But I can be a good queen, Kofi," Oluchi pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. "Think of what we could achieve together." Kofi raised his hand, silencing her. "My decision is final, Oluchi. Please, respect it and move on. You'll find happiness elsewhere, I'm sure." With those words, Kofi turned and walked away, leaving Oluchi standing alone, her dreams of becoming queen shattered. As Oluchi watched Kofi's retreating back, her sadness quickly turned to anger. "This isn't over," she muttered under her breath. "I'll be queen, no matter what it takes." Meanwhile, Kofi's heart felt light as he thought of Nnaala. Despite her initial mistake with the Egg of Power, she had shown true remorse and returned it willingly. Her honesty and bravery had touched Kofi deeply, and he found himself falling more in love with her each day. Little did Kofi know that Oluchi's jealousy and ambition would soon threaten his happiness and the peace of the entire village. The 3 market days passed in a whirlwind of excitement and preparation. On the morning of Kofi's coronation, the village square was alive with color and sound. Drums beat a steady rhythm as dancers moved in graceful circles, their bodies adorned with vibrant cloths and beads. The air was thick with the scent of incense and roasting meats, as villagers prepared for the feast that would follow the ceremony. Kofi stood before the village elders, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The head elder, a man with skin like weathered leather and eyes that sparkled with wisdom, stepped forward holding the sacred crown of their people. "Kofi," the elder's voice rang out, silencing the crowd, "you have proven yourself worthy of leadership. You have faced trials that would break lesser men, and you have emerged stronger. Do you accept the responsibility of leading our people?" Kofi's voice was clear and strong as he replied, "I do, with all my heart and soul." The elder placed the crown on Kofi's head, its weight a physical reminder of the responsibility he now carried. "Then rise, King Kofi, and lead your people." A cheer erupted from the crowd, so loud it seemed to shake the very ground. Kofi turned to face his people, a wide smile on his face. As he looked out over the sea of joyful faces, his eyes searched for one in particular, Nnaala. But she was nowhere to be seen. Later that evening, as the celebration continued, the head elder approached Kofi. "My king," he said, his voice low, "there is one more matter we must discuss." Kofi nodded, sensing the seriousness in the elder's tone. "What is it?" "A king needs a queen," the elder said. "You must choose a wife, and soon. It is important for the stability of our village and the continuity of leadership." Kofi's thoughts immediately turned to Nnaala. "I understand," he said, "and I know exactly who I wish to marry. Her name is Nnaala." The elder's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Nnaala? The maiden from the neighboring village? Are you certain, my king?" "I am," Kofi said firmly. "She has proven her worth and her love for me. I will send a message to her parents immediately." But as the days passed, Kofi's attempts to contact Nnaala proved fruitless. He sent messengers to her village, but they returned with troubling news. "My king," one messenger reported, bowing low, "we spoke with Nnaala's parents. They were confused by our request." Kofi leaned forward on his throne, his brow furrowed. "Confused? How so?" The messenger shifted uncomfortably. "They said they haven't seen their daughter in 2 days, my king. They thought she was visiting our village." "Impossible," Kofi shouted, rising to his feet. The room fell silent, all eyes on their agitated king. "How can this be?" Kofi paced the throne room, his mind racing. "Guards!" he called out. 2 burly men stepped forward, hands on their spears. "Search every corner of our village and the surrounding areas. Find Nnaala." As the guards hurried to obey, Kofi's advisor, an elderly woman named Ada, approached him. "My king," she said gently, "perhaps it would be wise to seek the counsel of the old wise man. He has guided you before, has he not?" Kofi stopped his pacing, considering her words. "You're right, Ada. Thank you for your wisdom." He turned to his attendants. "Prepare my horse. I ride to see the wise man immediately." The journey to the old man's hut seemed longer than ever before. As Kofi dismounted and approached the dwelling, he heard the familiar creaking of the door opening. "I've been expecting you, King Kofi," the old man's voice called out. "Come in, come in." Kofi ducked into the hut, his eyes taking a moment to adjust to the dim light. The old man sat by the fire, his wrinkled face illuminated by the dancing flames. "Wise one," Kofi began, his voice thick with emotion, "Nnaala is missing. I fear something terrible has happened to her." The old man nodded slowly, his eyes closed as if in deep thought. After a long moment he spoke. "Your fears are not unfounded, my king. Nnaala has indeed been taken." Kofi's heart raced. "Taken? By whom? Tell me, please." The old man's eyes opened, fixing Kofi with a penetrating gaze. "By one who feels wronged, one whose heart burns with jealousy and resentment. Oluchi, your first love, has taken Nnaala in an act of vengeance." Kofi stumbled back as if struck. "Oluchi? But how? Why?" "You rejected her, Kofi," the old man said softly, "and in her anger and hurt, she has lashed out at the one you truly love." Kofi's shock quickly turned to determination. "Where are they? I must find them." The old man raised a hand. "Patience, young king. Rushing in blindly will only put Nnaala in more danger. Return to your palace. Confront Oluchi, but do so with wisdom and restraint. Remember, a true king's strength lies not in his sword, but in his heart and mind." Kofi nodded, taking a deep breath to calm himself. "Thank you, wise one. I will heed your advice." As Kofi rode back to the palace, his mind whirled with plans. Upon arrival, he immediately summoned his guards. "Bring Oluchi to me," he commanded, "but treat her gently. We seek the truth, not revenge." The guards returned within the hour, Oluchi between them. Her face was a mask of defiance, but Kofi could see the fear in her eyes. "Oluchi," Kofi said, his voice calm but firm, "I know what you've done. Where is Nnaala?" Oluchi's mask cracked, her lip trembling. I don't know what you're talking about." Kofi stepped down from his throne, approaching her slowly. "Oluchi, please, I understand you're hurt, but this isn't the way. Tell me where Nnaala is, and we can resolve this peacefully." For a long moment, Oluchi said nothing. Then with a sob, she fell to her knees. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I'm so sorry. I was so angry, so jealous. I thought if I got rid of her, you'd have to choose me." Kofi knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Where is she, Oluchi?" In the old abandoned hut near the river," Oluchi whispered. "She's unharmed, I swear it." Kofi stood, turning to his guards. "Bring Nnaala here, quickly but carefully." As the guards rushed out, he looked back at Oluchi. "Thank you for telling the truth. Your actions were wrong, but your honesty now will be remembered." Hours later, as the sun began to set, the guards returned with Nnaala. She looked tired and disheveled, but otherwise unharmed. When she saw Kofi, her face lit up with joy. "Kofi," she cried, running into his arms, "I knew you'd find me." Kofi held her tight, his heart overflowing with relief and love. "Nnaala, my love, I'm so sorry this happened to you." As they embraced, the village elders entered the throne room. The head elder stepped forward, his face solemn. "King Kofi, a decision must be made about Oluchi's punishment." Kofi turned to face them, keeping an arm around Nnaala. "I have given this much thought," he said. "Oluchi's actions were born of pain and misguided love. While they cannot go unpunished, I do not wish to act in anger or revenge." He paused, looking at each elder in turn. "I propose that Oluchi be banished from our village for a period of 1 year. During this time, she must reflect on her actions and learn from them. If, after a year, she returns with true remorse and a desire to make amends, she will be welcomed back as our sister once more." The elders murmured among themselves, then nodded in agreement. "Your wisdom and mercy do you credit, King Kofi," the head elder said. "Let it be as you have said." In the days that followed, as Oluchi prepared for her exile, Kofi and Nnaala's love only grew stronger. They were married in a joyous ceremony that lasted for 3 days and nights, the entire village celebrating their union. As Kofi and Nnaala stood before their people as king and queen, hand in hand, Kofi felt a sense of peace and rightness. He had faced the trials of the spirit world, overcome great challenges, and found true love. He knew that whatever the future held, with Nnaala by his side and the wisdom he had gained, he could face it with courage and determination. And so began the reign of King Kofi and Queen Nnaala, a time of peace, prosperity, and wisdom that would be remembered for generations to come. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and stay tuned for our upcoming releases. We'll be dropping new videos on this channel regularly.